I'm Sean. This is the bottom side of a McLaren 570S. And an eagle-eyed viewer that didn't read the video description might notice something wrong with this car. It's leaking right there. That is because the owner of this car changed his own oil. And I'm not saying that you can't change your own oil, but I am saying make sure you do it correctly. And the reason it's leaking from right there is because he said he had a faulty torque wrench and it stripped the threads. Now, I haven't tried backing it out yet. You're gonna see that when I do it, but I've got to fix that. So that's what I'm gonna show you how to do. Now, what I've got here is a place to drain the oil into. I'm not using this entire container, just this thing I've set on top here. And the reason I'm doing that, this oil is new. It was just changed. It's probably going to come out looking a little dark. I don't know how well it was drained and that kind of thing, but the motor has cycled and there's still some oil left in it, so it'll darken it up. But I'm just going to drain from up here straight down to here, collect it. I'm going to reuse it. I don't know how much has been lost so far since when they did it. They have not been driving it, otherwise all back here would be just coated. All that was fine. So I'm assuming this hasn't really been driven at all except for on a trailer and off a trailer, because this was transported to me to do this. So we're going to collect it to reuse it. Then we'll have to check the oil level, top it off, but more on that later. For right now, he said he couldn't get it torqued, so I'm going to turn this by hand, or at least attempt to. Use a tool, get the oil drained out, and then on to the next step. With that just about drained out, you're going to get a lot of drips for some time, so you may have to work around that. But we're going to do what hopefully you do for your significant other, is tap that bottom end. This is an entire kit that I purchased, and we've got a drill bit that is just the right size for all this stuff. Then you have the thread itself. We're going to spin this, and that's what's going to re-thread it. And then kit comes with these, but I've got some shorter ones. Otherwise, you'll have to cut this about in half once it's in there. But this is what gets threaded into the threads that this made, and then your plug will in turn go into this thread. So this is the entire kit. I'll show you the other ones that I got here in a little bit, but you can use these. You just got to put them partway through and then cut them loose. Otherwise they go entirely too far for that plug. I've also got this, which is not easily opened with one hand, as it turns out, but it is a paste that is going to help lubricate while we're cutting with this here. It's also going to grab shavings and metal particles that you don't want to have floating around in the motor. So fortunately we have gravity on our side, but also this is going to pick up a lot of that and extract it. As you can tell, this thing is still dripping, and it's going to this entire process because that's what it does. So I do still have something to collect this, unless you just want to gather it on the floor. That is up to you. We're going to use our drill bit that was provided in the kit, and we're going to line it perfectly right up in there. And we're going to drill all this out. Now we're going to do it at a very slow speed with very little pressure. We're not trying to do this very quickly, and we want to make sure that when it comes out the other end, we're not causing any damage to what's on the other side of this right here. If you look up in there, you'll actually see you don't have that far before you hit another part of the plate. So we're definitely not trying to make contact with that. We're going to go nice and slow, and it is absolutely critical that you go perfectly straight up and down. It's not like this, it's not like this, it's not to or fro. It is perfectly straight. So if you've got to set it up there and just take a look at it from different angles, hold it there, have other people look at it if you need to, but make sure that thing is dead perfect straight. Now that we've got all the way through that, we're going to have to tap it. And yes, you're still gonna have to deal with all this oil that's still dripping unless you leave it for like a week. Then it might stop. But we're going to re-tap that right now. Now this is our tap, and this is our cutting fluid. So we are going to apply a bunch on here. I'm gonna smear this on here so it's spread out here. But we put that on our tap, make sure that's lubricated. The bottom end of this is a 7/16, depending which one you get. If you get the same thing, that's what we're dealing with. If it's something else, it's something else. If you actually have a die kit, tap and die, usually it'll be a handle with either equal ends. But I'm gonna end up using a 7/16 wrench to go on the end of this. I've done it before, worked fine. The big thing is going to make sure that you maintain it's perfectly straight up and down. So we're going to do that. This is the most stressful part of this whole job because once you've done it, you've done it. So we got to make sure this is straight lined up, just like the drill bit was. You know, none of that. Perfect when you start it. Once you get it started, you can turn it. It's okay as long as you're not applying force, you know, this way to make it do something weird. It should spin pretty easily. It's just getting it started in the right spot. That's the key. If people keep doing this, I'm going to end up making a jig to make this easy to center up. We've almost got all the way through there. We're gonna go clean all of these shavings off, make one more pass. And yes, I do know that you'll be in the comments telling me how I did it wrong or could have done it better. I'm not a machinist. I just know how to do this. You might notice that I did put more cutting fluid on it, or cutting gel or paste or whatever you want to call it, because again, we want to make sure this is making clean cuts. All right, I believe we're all the way through. Resistance has changed quite a bit. We're going to back it out and double check it. This is what we've cleaned off of here. And the threads are clean and good all the way through. Everything should be straight, look straight. So now we're on to the next part. Now, should you be wearing a watch through this? Probably not. Should you be wearing gloves while doing this? Probably. This is all very messy, as you saw, arms, hands all covered in oil. You see it's still dripping, you might still see it. So yeah, plan on a mess. Plan on being able to clear it up. This is the shorter coil that I got. These are a 1/2 inch. This would be more appropriate for length. You don't have to cut it short at all. These are, again, picked up outside of the kit. So I got some of these. Now, provided with the kit that I got, you've got this tool right here. And the idea of it is it slides right in. So that little notch where the little pigtail is, that's how you screw this in. So we're gonna set this in place, and then we're going to twist it, and that should get it all the way in there. Now, obviously you don't wanna go too far. You will thread it straight through and then you're never getting it out. So observe how much you're actually getting in there. So let's get it in there. We've got our insert. The shorter ones, as it turns out, the ones that I got will not work, so we're gonna have to put this part way in and then snip it, and we're gonna use this tool to do it. It goes in here like so, goes turny-turny. Now we're only going to go part way in with this because, again, we're going to snip this off, but we want to make sure we got a good depth on it first, and you can compare to another one. That's how far we're in. I think I'm going to go a little bit more. Now to snip this, we're simply going to pull it down so it'll kind of separate there. And then we're going to take some cutters, using protective eyewear, of course, and go snippy snippy. It'll be just a little bit left. We're going to spin that in so this is flat against there. And then we have to get the little end up there, which we're also going to have to cut off, and there's a couple ways that you might be able to do that. Now what I haven't shown you is when I went to go pull it to cut it, it actually pulled it out of the threads themselves. So it wasn't actually in it. So I had to pull it back out, which I used these to do. It was not easy, but what I've done now is I've gotten another one of the long ones. I've cut it to length, making sure that I held this tight as I was pulling it apart, got to the joint, cut it. We're just going to start with a shorter one and do this again. Now with this in place all the way, got that one, there it goes. We're in place all the way, but we still got the little nub up there we got to get rid of. I'm going to do that with those same needle nose pliers, and you should be able to twist it and break that out. And you see that goes right in nice and tight. Now I'm just checking to make sure that's actually going to thread in. What we're going to do, because this hole is now slightly larger, is we are going to put a different washer in there. And this is the washer that we're going to be using. Now this one is made of nylon, not copper or brass or aluminum, because good luck finding them. I've looked all over the place, cannot find them. This is intended for oil. This particular one I haven't tried yet. There's another one that I did on another car that I got from O'Reilly. That one did work fine. I suspect this one will work fine. This is the original. You notice it is quite a bit smaller in diameter. Inside is M18. Thickness also a lot different. The copper washers that I normally use for doing an oil change are a little bit thicker than this anyway. I'd like to get as many threads as possible in there. Obviously, this takes about maybe one thread off of that because of the thickness. There are some rubber ones that I've ordered but haven't received. I'm going to see how those work. I may put together a kit for this kind of thing, including all this stuff that I've been using. But this is what we're using right now. It should be fine. Now the reason we're using this other one is because overall diameter, which you'll see once it's in there. Since we bored it out a little bit more, we've got to make up that space. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this wide. This one's either 32 or 36 millimeters. I'd have to go back and look. But we want to make sure that we cover what we bored out and then threaded. That still has to seal. And of course we're going to torque this to 18 foot-pounds. Now this is all the oil that I took out, and it's really not that much. I'm going to pour it into an old container, like a 1 liter container or a 5 liter, any of the oil containers I've got extra. I'm going to pour it into that. I'll be able to measure it out, see exactly what came out, so you might have some kind of idea depending on how long it's been leaking. And then we're going to pour that right back in. We've got almost 2 liters is what we pulled out of that. Now that we've got the oil that we took out put back in, yes, you can just use new oil, but again, this is brand new oil. He started it, actually he didn't even start it and finally found the leak. He couldn't properly torque it. So it's been run next to no mileage. It's fine to put the old stuff back in. So with the oil back in, now we have to run it, warm it up, check the oil level, top it off, and also check and see if it's leaking. If you were cocked any which way getting that in there, it may still leak. Now, if you're using one of the nylon washers, it's possible that it could conform a little bit, compress, and it's still gonna be fine. If you're using a rubber one, it should do the same. If you're using a brass, copper, or aluminum, that may not be the case. So you definitely want to check that. Don't put the whole thing back together yet. When I received it, the under tray was already off. That's obviously another step you have to do. If you don't know how to do that, you probably shouldn't be tapping your engine. So we're gonna get this thing warmed up. We're gonna make sure that it's not leaking. We're gonna top off oil, and then we'll kind of do a roundup of everything I've done here. This car was delivered yesterday, and I parked it right here, and this is what I've had to soak up with sawdust from what it was leaking. Now, it didn't leak in my driveway. Now, I don't know if this car leaked in the trailer on the way here. It doesn't appear to have leaked in my driveway in the short period of time that I had it sitting there running and moving around, that kind of thing. So with it running, it appears to not really leak. And the other one that I did was the same way. Didn't really show itself until you got it nice and hot, got it circulated, and then let it sit. So I'm gonna let this sit for some hours and see if that changes. And if it doesn't, cool, successful fix. If it does leak, then it asks the question, why is it leaking? Did we not use a wide enough washer? Which we did. Does that washer type not work? Which it should. Or was it at some kind of angle to where it's not exactly straight up and down, there's a little gap, which there doesn't appear to be in that one. So this should, for all intents and purposes, be successful. So to recap the whole procedure, take the under tray off, take the old plug out, drain as much oil as you can. It's gonna keep being a super mess the entire time unless you sit there for, I don't know, maybe a week or two. Drill it out, use the tap, get it through there, take a little nub out, put the plug in with a new washer that is larger than the original, and top off the oil that it may have lost or maybe you didn't have enough to begin with, and that's it. Now the tricky part to all this is what happens when people who may not know exactly what they're doing with an oil change or have, you know, as in his case, he said a malfunctioning tool. When that happens, that costs you more than if I were to do the oil change to begin with. It got transported here because I wasn't going to do it in a parking garage on jack stands. Too many things can go wrong there. Not having the right tools and all that. So it cost more to get it here than it did for me to do the oil change. And it costs more for me to repair it than it would be for me to do the oil change. Now, just again saying that you will do this, not necessarily you can do it yourself, but I've run into this kind of thing more than once between strip plugs, strip threads, all that kind of stuff. Just remember that if you're gonna tackle this thing yourself for doing the oil change or this, it's all on you. If I were to do the oil change and I stripped it out, I would be the one fixing it on my dollar. So that's all up to you. Just remember that when you take your car to do an oil change at wherever place, are they actually gonna do it correctly or are they gonna screw it up? The reason my oil changes cost what they cost is not for what I'm doing, is to not screw up your car. So that's that. I hope you found this informational and helpful, and there's going to be somebody who's going to have to do this inevitably. So make sure you give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, check out all the other technical videos, all that good stuff, and make sure that you let this cool off, let it sit for a while, and check it again just to be sure. See you in the next one.